Welcome back to another making of video. Today I'm going to show you how I made the Overgrown jewelry collection. Overgrown is a collection inspired by the end of summer where everything is leafy, green, and overflowing everywhere. So my process always starts out the same, and that's planning everything. I figure out what crystals I want to use and make rough little sketches of the designs. And I kind of just lay everything out so I can see it and see what works good together and what doesn't. I love working with crystals and all kinds of natural materials. So I always start by making all the bales and wire wrapping certain things to start the process off. I pre-make each bale, I hammer a lot of the copper out to give it some unique designs, and then I grab my epoxy sculpt. Epoxy sculpt is the clay that I use to create my designs. It gives you about 3 hours of working time and then it dries very solidly, and that is what I electroform. I usually start by just adding on the bales first onto each piece and then allow that all to dry. Once the bales start drying on the pieces, I start adding the decorative elements, or create any of the large sculptural pieces, like this mushroom here. I love sculpting unique and interesting pieces, things that have a lot of detail, things you don't normally see. Sculpting process is my absolute favorite here. And with epoxy sculpt, you only have about 3 hours to work with each mixed portion of clay. So I mix them in small batches so I can work on the larger elements before adding on smaller and more detailed elements. I wanted to create a mushroom that looked like it was growing out of the tree agate, or as if the crystal was part of it. And that's where that design came from. And I just kept refining it and adding more and more details, and I think this is one of the most detailed mushrooms I have sculpted yet. process of sculpting a lot of these pieces is very relaxing and forces you to just kind of be in the moment, working with your hands, working on something, creating something brand new. With how many details I've started adding on, I started using a little magnifying glass with a third arm to kind of help sculpt some of them. I finally finished all of the sculpting and everything has dried, and I am extremely happy with this collection and how it turned out. I wanted it to emulate an overabundance of branches and leaves and greenery, mushrooms of all sorts. And the detail, I really wanted to add a lot of detail and challenge myself to make something more complex and different than I usually do. This hair stick, for one, is definitely something quite different from what I would typically make. Once everything has been sculpted, I take my Works Maker X rotary tool and start sanding and sometimes refining some of the details or fixing little mistakes. Sometimes I add even more details. Sanding and cleanup is an important part that really helps a piece get more refined, so you don't have those little sharp bits of clay sticking out. Once I've cleaned all the sanding dust up off of everything, I start painting. So everything gets painted with a layer of black conductive paint. This is how all the copper ions flow onto the piece when it's getting electroformed. This is a bit of a tedious process at times, because you have to go over and over the piece to make sure you don't miss a single speck. Otherwise, there will be no copper there. The more detail you add onto a piece, the longer it takes to paint everything. Once everything is painted, I allow the conductive paint to dry and then start dropping things into the electroforming bath. I do latex all of the crystals to make sure that nothing gets damaged in the bath. And one of my favorite parts is taking off all the latex and revealing the crystals underneath again. Now coming out of the bath, a lot of the pieces do get a bit of a dull coloring, but that doesn't last for long. Latex is peeled off, I take a steel brush and brass brush and polish everything all up first. So I want to get a nice shiny finish before the next step. Now the next step is going to be the patina. This helps really bring those details out and add more depth to your pieces. So I just gently brush it on. This is the first time I have been using the brass black, which helps to oxidize the copper and give it that darker finish. And overall, I like the effect that it created. I just used a Q-tip and gently brushed it on and allowed it to sit for a few minutes, and that very quickly oxidized the copper. The mushroom here, I tried something a bit different. I oxidized just the main stem and I left the cap more copper. Give it a little bit of a two-tone feeling. Now I keep a bowl with baking soda nearby so I can drop the pieces in there, and that will stop the oxidization. The hardest part is getting the patina in all the little cracks and crevices. But once the patina is done, give it one last shine, and then put a layer of Protect-A-Clear on each piece. The Protect-A-Clear keeps the oxidation level where it's at, and helps protect the copper from changing color any further. And there we have it, a whole new jewelry collection.